I'm going to show you how to make a grid for a calendar in Photopea. So once we line up our grid, then we'll be able to add our numbers and our days of the week and so on. So we're going to go with something like this that's finished and create something like this that we can then edit and change however we would like it to look. So first things first, I'm going to start a new project. I'm going to make sure that I have it named March or whatever our first month is. I'm going to add our width of 4.75 inches. Make sure you change that pixels to inches if you haven't already. 5.35 in height and 256 DPI. So I'll go ahead and hit create. So this is the first time we're using this, but down here on the left-hand side is the rectangle tool. You can create your grid with any of these shapes here, and all of these, besides the line, any of these other shapes you can definitely use to make your grid. So circles end up looking pretty cool. Stars take up a good bit of room. Maybe not the greatest choice, but it is possible if you take up a lot of room for your calendar days instead of pictures or something like that. So I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. And by default, this is probably red. We're just going to change it by clicking the red box here, and then we want to change it to white, right? So your fill is probably red off the bat, and you probably have no stroke. It probably looks like that. So you're just going to select, this is also probably red. It's defaulting mine to whatever my last settings were. So we're going to change that to black here. So I'll hit OK. And then you're going to add a little bit of weight to your stroke, which is that outline there. We're going to make it about 8, anywhere between like 8 and 11. So it's not huge, but we can still see it. Now, you can see my rollers coming across here. If you haven't already, you want to turn on your rollers by going to View, Rollers, and then that's going to turn this on and allow us to make guides and such, so that we can control how large our squares are. So mine is in inches. By default, yours is probably in pixels. To change that, you're going to right-click the roller and change it to inches. All right, so I'm going to create a new rectangle, right? And I'm going to hold Shift while I drag this out. And you can see my size is changing right now. It's 0.457. I'm going to move that until it's about 0.5, right? It could be a little bit larger, but you want to be pretty close to 0.5. And that's a good starting place so that I know I can get all 7 of my days of the week there. And then I'll be able to, make them larger or make them smaller based on how I want my design to look. So with one square drawn, I'm going to hit Control C. And since I'm still on this shape layer, it's copying whatever's on that layer. So I'm going to hit Control V, and you'll notice that it duplicated that layer for me. So I'm going to grab my Move tool over here and just bring it over. Now, the way that merge works, if you have these two touching, it's going to, whenever we merge these, it's going to make them into one shape. So we want to space it out just a tiny bit. Not a whole bunch because we need to fit, 7 days over here, but we do want to leave a little bit of a gap. Okay. If you want to make sure that these are on the same line, you can even drag down this guide and say, okay, I need to make sure that this line is right on here. So if I click on either one of these, I know that that blue line going through, right, that outline is going along that blue path. As long as those paths are touching this guide, then I'm good to go. And it'll lock to that guide since I'm placing it on there. So I have these two shapes. And what I can do is merge these together so that whenever I copy, I'm now copying 2 instead of just 1. And then that allows us so that we only have to fix one spacing here once I copy it over. So I'm going to merge these together by holding Shift and click on the other layer, and you'll see I have both of these layers selected. I'm going to hit Control E to merge that, and I'm going to hit Control C, Control V, and then I'm just going to move it over. So I still have the Move tool selected. And I want to make sure that this gap looks pretty even to this one. If it's not perfect, you can always use your arrow keys and just nudge it until it visibly looks, the same. So right there, it looks close enough. Once we zoom out, you really won't be able to tell if it's not exact. But We also want to make sure that this gap is the same as this gap. All right, so I'll just nudge it one more time and just, yeah, it's about there. So I'm just using my arrow keys to do that. So right now I have 4 shapes. I'm just going to hit Control V again. I'm just going to move these over. Right? So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days. I need to get to 7. If I hit Control V, I'm going to end up with 8, and I'll just delete 1. Right? So I want to make sure that my gaps are the same here. I'm just going to nudge it one more time, try to get that gap to look all the same. And I'll hit Control V again, and I'll have 8 total days. Right? So I don't need 8 total days, I need 7. But what I'm going to do before I delete that one is I'm going to merge these all together. So with this shape selected, I'm going to hold Shift, click my top layer, and it selects all of these. Control E, and it'll merge it all into one. Now, whenever I click this, it is moving all of these together. But down here, the Path Select tool will allow me to click each individual rectangle. And if I need to delete one, I'm just selecting this, and I'm just moving this. I can hit delete on my keyboard to get rid of it. All right, so I have 1 full week here. We need to end up with a grid that has 7 days and 5 weeks. So to do that, I'm just going to copy this shape, which will copy an entire week. Control C, Control V, grab my move tool, and move this down. Now, just like our left and right, our horizontal movement there, we would need to make sure that our vertical alignment is lining up as well. So I want to bring this over so that this is running along that blue path, and then I know it'll snap to that path here as well. Then I need to follow to make sure that this gap is about the same. So wherever I place this, my next week should have the same amount of space between. All right. So if you wanted to, you can just highlight both of these, merge them together. That's now 1. Control C, Control V. And just like that, I have 4 total weeks. Move that so that it lines up. I'm going to hit Control V again. And I'm going to line that up. Now, this is way too many weeks. I don't need 6 weeks. I only need 5. So once I merge these, highlight all. So click here, hold Shift, click the top, Control E. I'm going to grab my Path Select tool, and I'm just going to delete this bottom layer. So you can highlight them all just like that and hit delete. All right, so you'll be able to move this around, of course, wherever you want. So if you wanted it centered, you just want to bring that red line. Whenever it locks to that red line, that means that it's centered within this paper. If you need to make it larger, you can go to Edit, Transform, Scale, and it'll bring it up. If you hold Shift, it'll keep those proportions the same. If you don't hold Shift, you can change it however you want. But I recommend keeping the proportions the same. You decide on how big you want your grid to be. It does not matter. It's based on your design choices. All right. If you want to change, the stroke around there, if you want to add any color to this, you can do so 2 different ways. First way, if you want to change just individuals, use the direct selection. So if you wanted to change just one day, maybe there is, maybe there's no. Well, maybe it doesn't work on here, but yeah, if you want to change just one individual day, looks like you won't be able to do it this way. But what you can do is double click on here, and then you can change them all this way too. So if you want to add a gradient, change that to normal, right? It'll add a gradient on there. You can change this to whatever you want to meet your month, right? I highly recommend staying away from darker colors on this grid, because what's important with this grid is that we can read it, right? If you want to change the stroke around it, maybe you wanted a specific color, right? You can do so here, right? And that's around the whole thing. If you want to change the stroke around the grid inside, you have to change it here, right? And you can even change it so that it's dashed or something like that. Change the size, right? And that's inside the grid and outside. Inside here, right? So let me turn this stroke off. And then we can make this one larger. Oh, so it's changing that whole style then, if you add a gradient this way. Right? So however you want to do it, you can definitely add a gradient here too. Right? And then you have the outside this way, you can change it here. So you could change it in, you know, up here. There's so many different ways to do so many different things. You can change it in here, right? But that will prepare you for adding your text for your days of the week, adding whatever month it is so that you have a completed month, right, all in here. Good luck. If you have any questions, you can definitely ask.